You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are here to answer all of your mental health questions. So ask away. Today, we're going to be discussing perfectionism and how perfectionism can show up in our lives. And today I have with me Kathy Kinghorn. Kathy, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here.
You know, this is a great question because I think it's one that a lot of people feel, even if they don't really talk about it. So it's a quick question. We'll dive right in, and we'll hopefully help our listeners understand maybe what's going on underneath that perfectionism. So the question is, how do I let go of perfectionism when everyone's house is, quote, Instagram perfect? Yeah. What do you think about that?
Oh, what a great question. What a great question. I wonder if behind the backstory to that question is the question, how do I navigate failure? You know?
Yeah. How do I navigate failure? What do I do with myself when I feel like a failure, right? So let's just talk about perfectionism. How would you define perfectionism from a clinical perspective?
You know, perfectionism actually, I think it's gotten a bad rap as a word because we think of perfectionism as a negative goal, like we can't be perfect, right? But so perfectionism in my world is usually overreaching the goal. Like effort doesn't count. It's the end result. And when I get to the end result, and I'm never quite there at the end. Perfectionism usually shows up in a negative light in our minds. But you know, if you think about it, when I drove here, I wanted every other driver to perfectly stay in their lane. Yeah. There's a lot of areas I, for one, really enjoy perfectionism. If I'm in heart surgery, I want that surgeon to be perfect at installing whatever gadget he needs to keep my heart beating. So, when we unpack the word perfectionism, it's like, gosh, it's not just a clear-cut negative. I think there's some positives that come from wanting to have a goal of high achieving. But it sounds like in this question, we're saying it's not positive in my life. It's wearing me down.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing too is it feels like comparison. Yeah. Versus just this is what is going on for me. It's saying when I look and see everybody else's house, then I feel like mine's not enough. Right. So I think comparison really comes into play here. Right. And, I'm curious when you say perfectionism gets a bad rap. And you want perfectionism in some areas of your life. Why is it? You talked about some of the ways that it can be good, but in what ways can perfectionism really be damaging to a person? I mean, when can it turn from healthy striving to damaging?
Well, I think with this viewer's question, like maybe she really does have an eye for beauty. She really can make things beautiful. That is not a skill set of mine, but I know people that can. So as she views the world and she's looking on Instagram, she can go, that is beautiful. And that's healthy. You know, if you've got that eye and you can see it, but perfectionism is taking maybe that strength she has and taking it into a weakness of, well, now my house has to look like it's in that state of being independent. If I have 3 toddlers or if I have teens that I absolutely love crashing at my house and they eat messy and they're loud and noisy and they bump into things and sometimes break things, if that strength of enjoying and knowing how to create beauty goes too far, then I think that's where perfectionism comes in, where it becomes a weakness of I have to obtain at all times this beautiful space.
Yes. And, I think what is it? Why is that? When does it change from striving for excellence or appreciating something to becoming, oh my gosh, it has to be this way. This is the way it has to look, right? And what is that about, really? Why is it that, that strength turns to a weakness? Is it because we're just so hyper-focused on it? Is it because, this says something about me and my worth as a person? What do you think that is?
I think there is a fear that's behind it. Some fear of rejection. Somebody walks into my messy house and I'm not part of the club anymore of clean housekeepers, or part of what that might mean in my mind. So it could be just a fear of rejection. It could be a fear of not belonging to this higher level of existence. Our fears usually, they usually distort our story.
And it's sometimes hard to tell when we're having fear, right? I mean, I often think that that idea of somebody walking in and saying, oh my gosh, look at this house, it's disgusting, and she must not keep her house up. That there's fear behind that. Like, I'm being judged, that I'm not enough. So it's really not about the house. It's really more about, I feel like I'm unworthy now. I'm not enough. I'm not okay because I have this standard, or I think I should be something different than what I am.
Yeah, it's so true, Lindsay. I mean, to that point too, is that Instagram really is a snapshot. It's set up to be a snapshot, and that has its pluses and minuses. But there's times if your desire is to have that look, if you really saw your house, there's probably a lot of snapshot moments that it does look like that. That if you took that snapshot, it's like, this is great. The kids are in bed, everything's cool, and you've just cleaned it the way you like it clean. And you look around and you go, well, here's my snapshot moment, and I feel at home here. And there's a comfort to having everything in order in its place. But snapshots are snapshots. They don't tell the whole story. How many family pictures have you or I ever had that 17 minutes before it was chaos and there's teeth grinding and you're like, everybody stand still, You
will smile and look like you like each other, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And that snapshot moment, if you've got a great photographer and they catch it, people could go, oh, I want that beautiful, perfect family. And you're going, oh boy.
If you only knew, right? Yes. And it's true. We all have snapshot moments where things are great and that are wonderful to have, but they are not indicative of the entire story. And it's a reminder that like what you're seeing is not indicative of the entire story. And I think it's reminding ourselves of that snapshots are snapshots, right? And recognizing that. So I do wonder, when we talk about perfectionism, it being a protective strategy, right? So if everything looks just perfect in my house, when somebody comes in, then they can't judge me. They can't say that I'm not enough, or that I don't have my crap together, because look, it actually looks perfect. So can you talk about that as perfectionism as a protective strategy? Like, how do we use that to protect ourselves?
I think you nailed it, Lindsay, that we really do use it to, when we're looking outward for approval, we can get it pretty quickly. If we can tidy up our house and get that outward approval, it might sound, if you listen carefully, it might be that approval you've been seeking since you were a child from mom. Like, look at me. Am I doing enough? Am I being enough? And if you really pay attention, that need for approval might have been taught to you early on. And so without even paying attention, it could be a really young part of you that just goes, I just need my moment of approval. And that shores me up for the next day. And that moments of that outward approval, the problem is they don't stay with us. We have to keep going and getting them. And if we can't reach anybody outside, then we're in a real problem.
That makes so much sense. And when you say that it's a need to be seen. It's a need to be enough, right? So it really, perfectionism is not about having the perfect house or being neat. It's really like, how do I feel safe? How do I feel enough? How do I feel lovable? And when we are lacking that, we're going to try to find it in other ways that are not productive, right? So how do you suggest, if that is the underlying issue, like if we're looking at the root of the problem, how do we find safety and enoughness?
One way to do it is to really embrace yourself, really lean into failure, find ways to fail quickly. I'll give you an example. I hope our viewers just try this. Take a pencil with your non-dominant hand. If you're right-handed, pick up a pencil with your left hand. Finish that sentence. I love my new puppy. I love my kiddos. I love my new couch. Doesn't matter. Write it with your non-dominant hand. You're not going to write perfectly. You're going to fail at finishing that sentence. You're going to fail writing a beautiful lovely script sentence. Just notice, how hard is it for you to look at that messy handwriting? Is that really what comes up for you? Because you may find, and there's not a right or wrong answer, but you may find that you don't like to look at that it's too messy. It doesn't look good. What if somebody saw it? And that can really help you understand how much fear you're holding. Or you may look at it and that childlike handwriting, it might remind you of when you were a child and trying and striving to learn how to write like the big kids did, And it might bring back tender moments. I promise there's not a right or wrong to it. But if you try it, you are, by definition, since it's not going to be nicely scripted and looking good, kind of failed in the appearance, but it doesn't tell the inner story. So if you lean into failure on little things, what you're going to find is more resilience inside of you and way better relationships and a sense of belonging. Because when we can, I'll give you an example. I really relish feedback. I really do, especially from our team. And we just had an all staff. And I kind of went off and rambled on some stuff. And after it, I reached out to one of the team. And I promise you, I'm pretty confident I could have reached out to anybody on the team because they know I like feedback. And I said, hey, I felt like it was off. Did what I say land? Did it? And the team member I reached out to said, no, you went into too many examples and this and this and this. And I was like, I knew it. Yes, that feels absolutely right. So leaning into that failure helped me see how to improve the next time. So
now, but how do you have enough courage to do that, Kathy? Because, the idea of saying, give me hard feedback. Tell me what I did wrong here. I mean, I would imagine the person that you were texting about this had to have some safety with you, that this person knew they could be honest with you. And also that you were going, okay, I'm ready to receive that. To me, there's a part of me that, as you're saying this, get ready to fail. It's like, man, I feel like I fail in a lot of ways and that I don't even need to try, right? So why am I going, let's do this thing. Let's really fail. Like that actually feels really counter to everything in me that I feel like I'm failing when I don't want to fail. Why would I try to fail? Even though it's like, yes, we're getting more comfortable with it. Can I learn from what I'm doing, my mistakes that I'm making on a daily basis?
I think as humans, part of the human existence that's overlooked often is repair. And if we're not failing, we don't need to repair. If we're doing everything at a high level, there's no repair needed. But think about the moments you've had that somebody has repaired with you. It had to be preceded by a fail on their part. And what I find is people remember the repair when it's sincere, when it's humble, when it's honest. And so that connection comes in the repair. So even in that example about the meeting, the feedback was spot on. I didn't feel a need to apologize for the rambling or the disjointed presentation. I felt a need to improve, to be sure, but what we find is, I guess what I'm saying is the repair doesn't always need to include an apology. It might just be a point where I can improve on.
Mm. And here's what I like that you said, like you don't need an apology. Like, it's actually like, this is just information. It's information. It doesn't mean that you're now a terrible presenter, that you're a bad boss. It just means that, okay, that's information. I can use that and I can be better next time. As opposed to your worth is now defined by what happened in that meeting.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I also think repair is so important, but I don't think we are good at it. I don't think we know how to do it well. I don't think we are familiar with how to repair or how to receive repair. I think it's a skill that we, as humans, lack in a lot of ways. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And what a tragedy. What a tragedy, because I can tell you, I'm not long in the seat with knowing how to repair or even receiving feedback. When I was little, I read a lot. And because of that, I think I was viewed as really smart. So nobody taught me how to raise my hand and ask a question. So when I got into tougher stuff, truly, I didn't know how to raise my hand and ask a question, because if you're smart, you don't have to ask a question. You know stuff. And that was my story for far too long. And when I realized I didn't like that story, and part of it being in that story meant I couldn't receive feedback because I was bad, I had to take my story and change it. And so the move for me to receive feedback, genuinely receive it, welcome it, ask for it, was a journey. It was a journey of constantly going. And what I found on this journey is I've grown so much more as a human when I show up human and receive the feedback and gain insights from people that I would not have gained had they not been safe enough to give me the feedback.
Yes. What you said earlier was when we take our strengths, they can become a weakness. And that's exactly what you just said. Like, you were the smart girl, so you didn't need to ask a question, because smart kids don't ask questions. They already know the answer, right? But you were taking that strength of intelligence and it turned into a weakness. You couldn't ask a question, right? And it does make me think, boy, if we can look at the things that are our strengths, they often can become our weaknesses if we let them go unchecked, right? How do we manage those things? And again, the striving, for excellence is never a bad thing. But when it becomes, this is who I am, and this is where I hang my hat on my worth, my ability to be loved, we've got a problem. I often think too, we live in a society where love is based on performance. So you bring in all A's, guess what? Mom and dad are thrilled. They give you hugs, you go to dinner. But if your grades don't reflect all A's or whatever, right? What your parents think is okay. Well, are you going to dinner and getting hugs? Probably not. So it's a really tricky thing again, I think we tie it to our worthiness, our lovability. And it's so hard to unwind that, because it's not just with our parents. I mean, we go to work and then we get paid. What is that? We get paid based on our performance, going to work, doing the thing. So you can see how striving for more, better, bigger, better, it's kind of ingrained in our society. It's not just from a personal perspective. This is a hard one. This is really deep and ingrained in us. Would you agree?
For sure. And the other thing that's ingrained in us is we have to do it on our own. In American society, we're so individualized that it's not only that you have to do it, you have to do it on your own. And that the combo of that is deadly. It's just simply deadly, because we don't get anywhere on our own. Let's just be honest. We don't.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. None of us. And we never have, and we never will.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
And my gratitude for that is so immense. I mean, thank goodness we need each other. Thank goodness. We need each other to grow, to become. We need to live and love in a way that we're going to show up and have to repair, and that we're going to need the feedback to gain that repair. And so, like with this question, one thing is to really, really question your question. Like that question leads you down a path that probably you won't get a lot of information out of. A better question would be, do I enjoy making spaces beautiful? And so for me, it would be no, I just do not. That is a pain point for me. I like walking into beauty, but I sure don't love making something beautiful. I don't have an eye for it. But I wonder if our viewer really has this beautiful eye for beauty. And if the question was more about her, what she would like to have, would she like to make places beautiful? That can be expansive to, making a home where a rowdy bunch of teenagers are welcome. Mm-hmm. Making a home where babies know they're going to be cuddled and loved on. And the dishes are going to pile up in the sink because those babies are going to get cuddled and loved on. That's making beauty. So I wonder if the question could just be reframed to, do I enjoy making places beautiful? And how does that work for me? How do I do that already?
It's such a way of expanding. It's not just about the clutter or the dishes that are in the sink. It's how do people feel when they're in a space with me? Or how do I make people feel when they are in my home? Is that what matters more? Or is it that I'm just so concerned about picking up and making sure things are perfect, right? And I love that idea of expanding what it is, where we're really putting our worth and what matters to us. Because ultimately, again, where we put our time and our energy is what matters to us the most. So if we go back to what matters, is it connecting with people? Is it making people feel safe and loved? Well, then, boy, maybe we can go, you know what? The house isn't perfect, but who cares? That's okay, because that's not what matters most anyways, right? And as we were talking, what came up for me too is just that there is, in vulnerability, there is mess. It's messy. Boy, right? But when we're vulnerable, that's when we're connecting, is when we choose to say, this is all of me, warts and all. And you can see it. And you know what? It may be a little messy. In fact, it's for sure going to be a little messy. There's no question. But when we choose to show up in honesty and authenticity is when we really have true connection. And I really believe that when we decide to put away those pretenses, and you know what, the house is maybe not the Instagram house. Guess what? Welcome to the club. No one's is. Even if it looks like it from the snapshot, no one's is, right? Then we can really have some real, true, honest connection. And I just appreciate the honesty of our listener. I appreciate the honesty of saying, you know what, this is painful, that my house doesn't look the way everybody else's does. And it feels like this Instagram worthy perfection is not attainable. Well, guess what? She's right.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's the good news.
The good news is she's in good company, right? That none of us are in that boat. And a snapshot's a snapshot. And to remember that. A couple of things that I just want to reiterate, Kathy, is, that we can really take our strengths and they can turn into weaknesses. That reminder that when we have a strength, to recognize it and to not, again, that the example that you gave about you couldn't ask a question because you were the smart girl in class, and to recognize that, boy, how often are our strengths becoming our weaknesses, and to be aware of that. I also think compassion, recognizing that we live in a culture where we have performance. Sometimes our lovability felt based on performance, and to give ourselves some compassion around that. It's painful when we think that striving is what will make us enough, is what will make us worthy. That's hard. The other thing was find ways to fail quickly. Boy, I even when you say it, I started writing with my left hand. I failed miserably. I couldn't even do an E. I didn't know how to do it with my left hand. But to do that and to welcome it, right? And then to look at repair. And, I think we should do a whole episode on repair.
Yes, that'd be great.
Because there is so much there. And I think there's so much that we could learn about repair. In any type of relationships, we need repair. So is there anything else, Kathy, that we missed that you'd like to hit on?
Oh, I think you summed it up so beautifully, Lindsay. I really do. It's interesting when we get these questions, we feel the emotion behind them. We feel the heart, the concern, and the hope that we can add to their knowledge and improve their day. And so I hope we've done that.
Absolutely. I do too. I really do think that this question is meaningful, and there's a deeper root to this question, right? And understanding that striving for excellence is great, but when perfectionism is the goal, it leads to burnout. It leads to self-doubt. It leads to feeling of not being enough. And just to remind ourselves that what we see is not who we are, right? And to recognize that, that we are more than our house. We are more than the way our bodies. We are more than the way we look. There's so much more to us, and to give ourselves some compassion around that. We are grateful that you're here, that you have been here with us, and we hope this episode gave you a breath of fresh air. If it felt refreshing and insightful, please share it with someone who you also think can benefit. And send your questions, remember, to the therapist question box at Therapy Utah. And until next time, take care.